is or titles,
Sure.
if you're allowed to say.
No, it's fine. I can. Let me go back a little bit further from what I'm currently doing. Previously, I worked for the Department of, or the Texas Department of Protective Services, which includes CPS, child care licensing, APS, all those regulatory agencies. And I worked there. When I left there, I was an abuse neglect supervisor when I left. And I left because it was just, it was just too stressful. It was just affecting my life too much. As an abuse neglect supervisor, I had a unit of 7. They were split up. I had 3 inspectors and 4 investigators, and I just couldn't do it anymore. It was consuming my life, and because we were always so short staffed. So I left there, and when I left, I still had that passion. And so I went to the court system, and now I'm just a guardian ad litem, assigned through a judge for children that are in state care.
Okay, I always assumed a guardian ad litem had to be an attorney.
No, that's in Texas. That's an attorney ad litem.
Oh, really?
And a child gets both. When they come into care, they get a guardian ad litem, and then they get an attorney ad litem. So they are assigned both.
Well, I have never seen. I've only ever seen guardian ad litems, and they have been attorneys. So in the state of Tennessee, I'm not saying that's the way it has to be, but that's all I've ever seen.
Yeah, no, I guess a lot of different agencies do it differently. I can tell you that the attorney ad litems that I have worked with typically only handle the legal aspect of it. They're not visiting the child on a regular basis, going in the homes, doing all of those things. Attorney ad litem's basically here in Texas just handle the legal aspect of it, and then expect an update from me. So that's just basically,
Okay. Now that we got that out of the way, like I said, it wasn't that it was important, but it's just to let people know, that you do know what you're talking about when it comes to certain situations.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, so in your opinion, can I pick your brain about something else real quick?
Sure.
Your experience, and if you can't say or do not want to say, that's fine.
Okay.
You followed the summerwells case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even know where to start.
Right? That's why I was like, what are you going to ask?
Okay. Say CPS was coming that next day. What do you think they were doing? Do you think they were closing out a previous case?
Well, it just depends, because I have heard that Candace tended to avoid CPS.
Right.
So they could have been trying to do just a follow-up. It could have just been a follow-up. Typically, when you close out an investigation, it does not require a visit. You just take your follow-up visit, and then what the parents have done, the changes they've made, and blah, 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 verify all that stuff. And then you can close it out, and then you just send them a letter in the mail. I usually had my staff, and then when I was doing it, we would call them. But technically, you just required to send a letter in the mail saying that it's closed and you're good to go. People saying that they were there to pick up the children, I can tell you now, I'm just speaking from Texas, okay? Because I've never worked in Tennessee, so they may do things completely different. But most social service agencies work their policies because their goal is the same. So most of their things are very similar.
Right.
And you don't ever warn a family that you're coming to remove their children.
Exactly.
You don't. So they would not know that.
But
you can't tell them.
They do notify you when they're coming to do a home study.
Yes. Okay. Like during an investigation, they try, like allegations have been called in, they try not to let you know they're coming. Okay.
Right.
So they'll go make visits. But if Candace was avoiding them, so to speak, and they went out there so many times and they couldn't get her, then they would have to call and say, okay, look, we're coming on this day. We need you to be home. Or you leave a card on the door, and, with your phone number, and write a note on the back of the card saying, please contact me. Because after you've sent your staff for so many visits and they can't get anybody, you can't waste that time.
Right.
So you would notify them for that. But typically during an investigation, you don't want them to know, because whatever is wrong, they could potentially correct it before you got there. They could also warn their children, you better not say a word. So, I don't think that they would have been known about an investigation unless they couldn't get, anybody to respond to them. Then they would notify them. Now, once they are monitoring the family, they do let you know when they're coming. They call and schedule.
Once they have an open service case.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let me throw this idea at you and let me get your opinion about it. Because, and I discussed this with somebody else. Okay, back in, I believe it was September, when Allie had to call the law to have her 2 children removed by law enforcement because Candace had threatened to blow her brains out if she came up there.
Right.
Okay, and supposedly the teenagers were drinking and stuff. Now, when that happened, obviously they didn't go to jail. Nothing happened as far as, charges. Would a Child Protective Service case have been opened under those circumstances?
It just depends. It depends on if the officers contacted CPS. Now, domestic violence, like when Dawn went to jail that time for the domestic violence stuff.
October 2020.
That will open one.
Okay, so that September, October, that still would have fell within the 6 month if they were closing, because there was rumors they were closing
Okay, wait. It was October of 2020 though, wasn't it?
Yes, and in Tennessee, once a protective service case is open, even if they find nothing, it stays open for 6 months.
Okay.
June would have been little over 6 months, but then you have the problem of Candace avoiding CPS coming or closing them out or whatever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's feasible that may have been what they were coming to do instead of take the children.
Could have been, but they wouldn't have known.
Okay.
They wouldn't have known.
That's the kind of thing I'm trying to pick your brain, because I would love it if a paralegal, a lawyer, or a CPS worker. I'm not asking for detailed specifics.
Sure.
But tell me what you know about the law as far as CPS goes, or as far as the law goes. Tell me what you know, and that would help the rest of us understand.
Right.
And like the showers in Texas. At CPS, not the law, because I haven't found any law in the United States that says it's against the law. But say you had someone call you up and say a grown man is taking a shower with all 4 of his children. What would CPS do?
Oh gosh. It would
hypothetically.
Well, it would depend. I mean, you would certainly go out. You would talk to the family. You would talk about. See, this is where you get into a fine line, because there are certain things where you have the freedom to raise your children the way you want to, as long as you're causing no harm. And we have to be really careful that we don't cross that line and trying to teach or tell people, mandate how people parent. So, they probably would have gotten some guidance on it, probably maybe some parenting classes, and told that, this is not a good idea. Maybe boys with the dad of the boys, if that's how you have to do it, or whatever. And it also depends on the age of the child. The younger the child is, the less they're going to worry about it. But the older the child gets, then certainly they're going to worry about it. Now, if they talk to those children and they found out that something went on in that bath that was more than just taking a bath, then we're in a whole new territory.
Okay. So. As far as the boys being seeing counselors, therapists, that kind of thing, they would have started that immediately as soon as they were taken into custody, correct?
Absolutely. And I can tell you that those children, I mean, this is hypothetical because I don't know anything about the boys specifically.
Right.
I'm just going to tell you hypothetical. What would happen is they would immediately go for a forensic interview. And a forensic interview is more than just a caseworker or an investigator sitting down and talking with the children. Matter of fact, the caseworker and them, they shouldn't even be asking the kids anything before they go to a forensic interview because you don't want to put anything in their heads. So they go for a forensic interview, which forensic interviewers are specifically trained to do nothing but that. You know, they know exactly how to ask. They know all of that, and it's recorded every time. Now, with kids that young, sometimes it takes more than once, because if those kids have trauma and they've been told anything such as, you know, there's fear, there's guilt, there's wanting to protect parents, there's all kinds of reasons that children won't talk. And so it takes a while sometimes with some of them to get it out of them as to, you know, what's going on.
What to make them feel comfortable and safe enough to open up.
And they typically do them in those advocacy centers where it's kind of nice and cozy, and, you know, the kids feel comfortable. There's toys, there's televisions, there's, you know, and sometimes a forensic interview can last hours and hours because that person is going to sit in there with that child, and, you know, every 30 minutes they might just get a little piece of the puzzle, because then they're going to play for a while. Right. Because they have to trust you.
Now, as far as the gag order, I understand, and I know a lot of people do understand, anything that deals with minors is confidential. When it goes into court, everyone is made to leave the courtroom except the people that are directly involved.
Right.
Okay, right. So when they put a gag order on the mom and dad, what did that tell you? Hypothetically, in general?
My first initial reaction to that was that those parents were trying to talk to those children about what to say.
Well, we have that actually. Don did admit that he did talk to Joseph.
And the gag order came after that.
Yeah, it did.
Yeah.
I do apologize. I know that's not what you came on panel for.
But no, it's fine. Totally fine. Totally fine.
Anything that we can do to help any child, you know.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And the knowledge is power. And it also keeps down on the theories and the running amucks about this is what happened, that's what happened.
Right. And another thing regarding the Wells case that I've always, like, when I hear lives and I hear people saying this, I'm like screaming at the computer, like, no. Because they're talking about, okay, when Candace and them, when Ronnie Lawson said that they had lawyered up, okay? And then people were saying, well, that was with CPS. Okay, in Texas, I'm just going to tell you how it works in Texas. Okay, the children get an attorney. Each one of the children get their own attorney, not a group, but each one. And their attorney, that's the attorney at Litem. Then they each one get a guardian at Litem. And then the parents go and fill out some paperwork, and it's based off of income or whatever, but I've never seen anybody be turned down. The parents get assigned an attorney. Now, that attorney is strictly for that CPS case. That's all they're for. They will not give you guidance on anything else. They will not, none of that stuff. So, you know, I've heard people say, well, you know, the state's not going to give them an attorney. They're just going to give the kids an attorney. Well, that's not true. Not in Texas. Now, maybe there they don't do it. But in Texas, especially when you get to the place where you're going to terminate rights, they have to have legal counsel.
Right. Okay.
So, yeah.
Getting into that, what is the, I don't know if I'm going to ask the right question. What would be the maximum time limit before DHS, Department of Children's Services, says, okay, we're fed up. We're not playing your games no more. We're just going to terminate?
Yeah. Well, you know, I had looked up, it's been months ago where I'd looked up Tennessee's, and I don't know what they're, but I can tell you what Texas is, and I can tell you that the states are pretty close. In Texas, you have 12 months to get your act together. 12 months. And there are status hearings in between, like every 3 months. You'll go and have a status hearing to see if those parents are following that service plan and they're doing what they need to do. And so say you have a parent who has really been working hard and they're passing their drug test, they're going to the parenting classes, they're doing all these things, but they just have one more thing that they need to do. Maybe it's gain employment, or they're living with someone and they need to gain, housing that's appropriate for the children or something, but they've really been trying and they reach the 12-month mark. Typically, our judges, the ones that I work with, always will give an extension in those circumstances, and they'll give them an extra 6 months. So it's a total of 18 months because they got an extension. Now, if you have somebody that comes in, which I had a family like that, and I can tell you that if the judge could have terminated at 6 months, he would have done it because they weren't doing nothing. They just didn't care. Like half time didn't show up. If you have somebody who's not made an attempt whatsoever and you get to that 12-month mark, you're not going to get an extension. So Tennessee is going to be somewhere in that range. And there's a reason for that. The reason is you cannot drag those kids along. It's not fair to kids. Kids deserve permanency. And if the parents aren't going to get their act together and provide permanency for them, then we need to move on and terminate the rights and see if hopefully, and this is what I don't understand. Okay, my role as a guardian at Litem, one of the biggest things I do is try to find family members that are suitable to place the kids with, because it's so much better for the kids if they're appropriate, the family members, because then they're still with their family, and it's just different. It's like so many of my cases, I've had 4 cases that I was able to adopt to extended family members. And some of them choose to never let the parents be involved in the kid's life. And some of them have chosen to maybe after a couple of years, let them visit. But I don't understand why no family from the Wells were contacted. I mean, like Dawn has a sister, Sonia.
In my opinion, as far as that goes, I don't believe any family or family friends would be allowed to take those boys until after all the investigations are over, until they find out what happened with Summer.
Sure.
Like I said in my video the other day, they have to make sure that the boys are safe. And if the boys know something.
Right. No, I get that part. I'm just like, when they go to terminate, because I don't know the status of their case. I've heard they've already been terminated. I've heard they've not been. Instead of, like putting them up for adoption with strangers, which I've also heard they're with a foster home that's a very good home. So, if that's the case, then, and they're going to be adopted by them, then that's great.
Right.
But I don't know. Like I look at it this way, like if I had a child in my family who was taken into foster care, not my child, but like, an extended family member, even distant relative, I would be throwing a fit to get that child.
I would too. I mean, it would never even go to that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Amy Lou, who knows the family, she's known them for a while. She says there was no family to take them.
Well, there you go. There you go.
Not that there wasn't any family to take them. No family was interested in taking them, should I say.
There you go. Well, and when you run into that, then there's nothing you can do. Nothing you can do. So. Okay.
Can I ask you what you think your theory might be about Summer?
Oh gosh, it changes every day. Because it's like, I mean, it really depends. Like my initial and the one, because I have like maybe 3. My initial is that it was some type of accident cover-up. But then the more we've learned about this family, then I look more into the trafficking. and something going wrong. Not trafficking so much as selling her. So probably use the wrong word there, but letting her be used, so to speak.
Right.
And then returned home, and then something happened and she didn't come home. So, I've thought about that. But seriously, there's so much that happens every day. Then we find out this stuff about Jody Sue's son, and in the woods, and you hear all these things and you don't know what's true and what's not true. And I can tell you this much: I do not think that it was a stranger abduction.
Right.
Nobody went up there and took that child.
In Texas, or where you're from the cases that you've dealt with, has there been many? Because when this all first started, everybody kept saying, "Oh no, it's too young. She's too young to be worrying about trafficking," because that normally starts about 11.
I mean, that group, that is correct when you get to that older adolescent, early teen age. Yes, but there are sick people out there, and there are groups of people who prefer younger.
Don B's asking, are gag orders the norm when kids get taken?
Nope. No, they're not, because they're typically not needed.
Exactly, because minors, everything's confidential when it comes to minors. And everybody is, and everybody's shunned out of the courtroom. They're not allowed in there. That's what I've been saying.
Yeah. So no, this was specifically done, and it was done for a reason. And it had to do with the parents, I guarantee you.
Well, like I said, Don Wells did state on, what was it, Doug's channel, that he tried to speak with the oldest child about his sister. And that's when they were told they couldn't come back.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly. So, yeah, that's, this whole case is just, it's craziness. It's, it's craziness.
It is. And it gets crazier every day.
I know. That's why I said my theory changes every day, because it's like, I think I finally get to the place where I'm really confident of, like, okay, this is what I truly believe happened. And then within a day or two, something else happens, and it's like, okay, well, wait a minute, maybe it was this. Excuse me. So I don't know.
So do you think Don B showed a court date when they put the gag order in place, which was October of last year? Would it normally show up about a year later that they would, show up for court again to finalize anything?
Well, the gag order is going to stay in place for the duration of the case. And so, I mean, unless, say, someone was found in the middle of that and everything came out. But then that's a whole different story. So if Tennessee does like about the 12 months, or even if they do longer, say they did 18 months, even at 12 months, they're still going to have a hearing. Because you're going to have hearings, like I said, we do every 3 months. Sometimes it's for COVID threw everything for a loop. So, and a lot of times our hearings have been virtual. I have an adoption coming up, and it's actually virtual. I'm like, why are we doing virtual now? But but at 12 months, they're going to have a hearing anyway, because they're going to be due for a status, whether it's the completion of the case or not. They're still going to be due for a status.
Right.
So, but I wish. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I wish I knew the exact time frame for Tennessee. I looked it up once, and I cannot remember for the life of me what it was. Somebody knows. Tell me, y'all put it in chat if somebody knows. But I don't know. I have not seen any action from the parents showing that they have any, besides the little bit of work they did on the house, that they want their children back.
Right.
You know,
Don B's asking, will the 12-month hearing be a little more strict than the others?
well, yeah, because at the 12-month hearing, if it's a final hearing, well, then it is, because that's when the determination is made. Status hearings. Okay, let me explain the difference. A status hearing is where you go before the judge, the parents appear, and they say, okay, where are you on your service plan? Because CPS group was part of service plan with all the things you have to do. Random drug testing, parenting classes. Just depends on like what the problems were. So when you go for a status hearing, they're looking at that service plan going, okay, have you done this? Check. Have you done that? Check. Oh, you still need to do this. And so when you have parents coming for status hearings and there's nothing you can check off on that service plan because they haven't done anything. They don't make their visits to visit their children, or even if they do make their visits, like I had one time who she would make her visits, but all she did the whole time was sit on her cell phone. And she wasn't interacting with her children at all. She didn't play. She might take a selfie with them so she could post on Facebook, but then for the rest of the time, she's not playing on her cell phone and her kids are just in the room. And it's like, this is not what this is about. And so if you have a parent like that during status hearings, okay, the judge and the caseworkers and the attorneys, they're already making notes. So when you get to that final hearing, because they've been warned in their status hearing, you better get your act together. You better get this done, because on this date is when the decision is going to be made. And if you have not done these things, you will not have your children. So if the 12-month was the final hearing, then absolutely. I mean, they're just going to flat out just tell them, hey, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. So.
Okay. Lori says, how will the public find out when the Wells have CPS court?
They, especially in this case, they probably won't. They probably won't. Now here, our hearings are open to the public. We have some judges who, if they're virtual hearings, they'll just do them on Zoom and then delete them after they're over. And then sometimes, like, you can go on YouTube and you can watch some of our hearings, because some judges leave them up. But, you know, they're open to the public. All courtrooms are open to the public. So I don't know how Tennessee does it. That would be a good question to call and ask. You know.
Okay. Would there be random drug testing?
Absolutely. And you get, I mean, it's random. There is no warning. There is no set schedule for anybody to, you know, plan some kind of something so that they don't pop dirty. Okay. Go ahead. Well, in Texas, if they refuse, like, say they're called and they're saying, hey, it's time for a drug test, you need to get down and go, you got to be there by this time, and it's very short notice, and they don't show up, automatically counts it as a failed drug test, unless they can provide a really good reason why they couldn't go.
Okay. Do you think Don and Candace are hiding behind the boys' court case to keep from talking to investigators in the Summers case?
I think they're using it as an excuse, probably. But even if we weren't in a situation where they had a gag order with the boys, I don't think we would get anything from them anyway. I mean, look what we got when they were on YouTube.
Right. Let me ask you something. Do you think it was a dirty UA that caused the boys to be took?
Probably. I mean, there's probably a lot of circumstances, but that's the easiest way to be able to remove a child.
Okay, one more question for you. Well, I mean, that I can think of right this second.
Sure.
Okay. Say something worse happened to the boys, right? They were abused. You know what I'm talking about. Okay. I was told that if that was found out, they would have to start action right then, filing charges and dealing with it before they went to find out if there was any other neighboring kids or friend kids or whatever that had been messed with. Is that true? Or would they collaborate the whole thing together?
It would not be together because each case is individual. It would kind of depend on what actually happened, the circumstances of it, and then how they were able to prove it. Because you have to remember this. People always say, why are there not criminal charges yet? Why are there, why? If they got taken for neglect, why haven't they got child neglect charges? Well, there's a reason. The standard that CPS or a child welfare agency has to use is like a 5150. It's preponderance of evidence. So if you got, and I say 5150 just to make it, to show how, I mean, typically it's not that. Typically it's a little over here and a whole lot over here. But if 51% of your evidence says this occurred and 50 of it says it didn't, they can still remove your children. Now, in a court of law where it's criminal, you've got beyond a reasonable doubt. So your burden of proof is way higher. So they're not going to file charges unless they can prove them. And there are a lot of things that CPS remove children for that you cannot prove in a criminal court because you cannot meet that burden of beyond a reasonable doubt. So.
Okay. But the boys were taken to a doctor first and foremost as soon as they were taken, correct?
Should have been. And it depends on what the boys said. Because if the boys did, like where did these allegations come from? And if there was no reason to believe that occurred and the children weren't saying it and there was nobody making those allegations, then they probably didn't. They probably didn't take them. Because like a lot of times kids have been in foster placement and then a foster parent notices there's a problem and takes to a doc and then calls and says, hey, I think we need to take them. So, their main concern when they take them is where are we going to put them? Who's going to take them? Right, so unless, now I can tell you this, if it's physical abuse and there's injuries, like a broken bone or something, then they're going to take that child and they're going to do a full skeletal scan, which will show like if there's old injuries that are different stages of healing. And then they will also do skeletal scans on the siblings to see if they have like old wounds, old healing fractures and things like that. So it just depends on the circumstances. If they come in and the allegation is SA,
right,
and they say, there's some physical, then yeah, that's going to be a priority to get them to a doctor. But if they're saying we're taking these children because mom and dad both popped dirty on a UA, they're not going to take them for that. They're not, or to a doctor for that.
Okay. If they find that there was abuse on all three, would that be considered three separate cases or one lump package?
Criminally, I don't know. It would just depend on how the district attorney wanted to handle it, because I've seen it done different ways. Sometimes they'll split them up so that if they don't get a conviction on one, then they still have the other two that they could do. For instance, this is a totally unrelated situation, but maybe it'll help explain this. Like, we had a case, it was a daycare, and I made a video about it. It's on my channel, where she left all the kids at home alone, and she went shopping. And these were babies. And the house caught on fire. And all, 4 of the children passed away, and 3 were injured severely. Well, when she went to court, they only charged her with the one count, the one murder charge on the one, and then she got other charges. But so they could save those other charges in case she didn't get convicted or didn't get a really heavy sentence. They had something to fall back on.
Okay.
So it just kind of depends.
Robin says, if the boys don't want to return to their so-called family, do they have to?
There would be a lot of counseling that went on if you had a child express that. But if a family is found fit and they have done everything that they're supposed to do, and the state says they can have their children, you cannot rightfully take someone's children away from them without grounds to do so. And children can't just say, I want to go live with so-and-so. I mean, you kind of compare it to your child, 9 years old and decides, hey, I don't want to live with mom and dad anymore. Their rules are too strict. So I want to go live with Johnny, who's 3 doors down, and his mom says it's okay. So I'm going to go live there. You can't do that because the parents have rights. And so they have the right to take their children unless they violated something. So if the boys are older, sometimes when we talk about teenagers and they're getting close to that age where, 16, 17, sometimes they will work with them on that. But when you're talking about children at the age the Wells are, if the parents did what they were supposed to do, they can't legally keep their kids.
So it's not like when there's 2 parents fighting amongst each other and the kids can choose.
No, because both of those parents have rights to that child.
Right. Okay. Corey wants to know, she says she's not sure how to word it, but can they get 1 or 2 of their children back, but not all 3 since their cases are separate?
Mm-mm. No, they'll return as a family unit because if the parents met the standards to get their children back, then they've met the standards. So whether they had 1 child or they had 5 children, they've done what they need to do. So they'll get all their children.
Do you think their rights will be terminated?
Yes. I mean, just off of what I know. I mean, I'm just speculating, but just off of what I know and what I've seen as far as their actions, I mean, there just doesn't seem to be any desire to get their kids back. I mean, I even heard that they weren't going for, I don't know if this is true. So we have to keep in mind, there's always things that we've heard that may not be true, but, I heard that because the children were placed like such a long distance from, it would be a long drive, that they decided they weren't going to go because of that.
Right.
Well, then, what's your priority? Your gas mileage or your child? Your time in the car or your child? Well, you're showing me right there what your priority is.
Right.
So I just can't see them giving them back.
Deborah says DW said the boys' case had nothing to do with Summer. If CPS now or knows how they were living, why weren't they taken away before Summer happened?
Good question. And I really can't answer that without knowing everything that was done and what stage they were in with CPS. And the other thing that I have to remind myself all the time, especially back when I was, doing inspections and things. Like, I live a certain way, and I can walk into someone's house, and there's no way that I could live in that house. The way that it's cluttered, it's whatever. But it does not meet the definition. It's not harming the kids. And it's really tricky because you have to put your own biases and your own way of doing things aside, because if that was the case, every dirty house I went into, I would have said, they need to get these kids out of here.
Right.
So I don't know. I couldn't really answer that question unless I knew exactly where they were at in the investigation, what they had done, all of that, and you also have to remember, if that CPS case was started because of the domestic violence, if that was the true reason, then they're focusing on that. I mean, they're going to be doing other things as well, but, it's not like the allegation came in that says, hey, these people are beating their kids. It's, hey, these parents are, arguing and fighting, and there's domestic violence, and the children are witnessing it. So.
And plus, she said during the phone call to 911 that he was going to hurt the baby.
Yeah, she did say that, but I don't think there was ever any proof of that. And then right after that, she retracted what she said.
Right, and she took away the order of protection and went right back to it. Can she is there a possibility where she took the order of protection out because she feared for all their lives and then retracted it, and then later on something happened to Summer? Could that possibly come back to bite her in the butt? Could she be nothing could happen if something happened to one of the kids? Okay. Don B says, once the case is over with the boys, do you think it will clear the way for Summer's case to proceed?
I hope. This is just my speculation, but those boys are key. They are key to Summer's investigation. And I don't really like talking about the boys a whole lot. But I can tell you that those kids have said things. And that time that who was it? Was it Pruitt that said they're kind of the cases are kind of bleeding together?
Yeah.
Okay. That's why. Because they're using information that they're getting from CPS. That's part of their investigation. Not necessarily what happened to the boys, but what the boys are saying. So they've got it. They can't tell anybody. It's confidential. So
Audrey, I want to thank you so much for coming up here. And I know it was originally for Troy, and we will do the Troy again.
Yeah, well, hopefully we get some answers about Troy, because really right now we don't have anything.
Right.
But I'm going to continue on my channel, and then maybe we can, meet up again when we get some kind of resolution to this or get some answers. Because I'm not, I'm going to keep on with him because I'm going to follow that story. So.
Well, it's just as bumfuzzling, even though it's only 3-4 weeks old. It's just as bumfuzzling as the Summer case, because there's no arrest been made, no charges been filed.
Yeah, and the thing with Troy that bothers me is we have a body,
Right, and the autopsy has been done, and it's finished.
They're just not telling us what it is. They say pending. Well, you know why they're saying pending is because it's part of their criminal investigation. So.
Oh, why? In your opinion, why would they not release the 911 call?